Yes, everyone, and welcome back to our second edition of the Irish Hotspur podcast, the Tottenham Weekly podcast, where pretty much it's just a therapy kind of session between David and myself here. And this week it's actually a bit of a special one, not just kind of random topics that we're sort of going to dive into that you guys get to listen to. It's going to be very much a North London Derby special this time. The second episode, Dave, good to be back doing this one, but North London Derby special is certainly going to be very unique in comparison to what the rest of these episodes would be. Because, like I said, normally these are kind of nice little ways for us to talk about things that maybe we don't get the opportunity to talk about on the YouTube channel. But this time we're going to be talking all things, hopefully, North London Derby. What are your thoughts? Anything you want to say ahead of time before we get into the topics?
Just welcome back to the Irish Hotspur. Hopefully you enjoy this podcast today. Plenty of talking points. And look, I'm buzzing for the North London Derby, Jack. It's going to be different at the Emirates than what it was last season under Nuno. Arsenal, Arteta, Tottenham are in town.
Yeah, absolutely. And everybody, if you're watching this back on YouTube, make sure to smash that like button. Get me your comments in below. Any thoughts that you may have on the podcast, any topics that we may have hit, and everybody as well. Do check out the links that this podcast will be uploaded on Spotify as well as Amazon. But let's get into it, Dave. The 3-4-3 and the 3-5-2 have been very big talking points after the Leicester game and also going into this North London Derby, especially since the 3-4-3 has been a bit frustrating for certain Spurs fans, thinking that it's been a kind of a bit dry, perhaps not very good going forward. We concede a lot of possession with that 3-4-3 in certain cases. It can be maybe even seen as negative by certain fans and whatnot. But the 3-5-2 has only been used so often. It seems to be used in kind of the second halves of games. And but by the same breath, it's kind of what Spurs fans have been asking for is that 3-5-2, and they want to see more of it. And in the Leicester game, they did get to see it, and it looked effective. But the big question is, does Conte go for the 3-5-2 against the likes of Arsenal, or does he stick with the true and tested 3-4-3? What are your thoughts on this, Dave?
Look, I would actually go with the 3-5-2 against Arsenal. And I'll tell people why more to the end of my analysis. But I've looked at the 3-4-3 and I've looked at the 3-5-2 in great detail. Now, the 3-5-2 is what Conte actually used at Inter, which helped him trump Juve in the Serie A. But with Tottenham, he seems to like the 3-4-3. And it's a system that has gotten Champions League football and brought him some good success at Tottenham compared to where we were to where we are now. So we'll start with the 3-4-3. But quickly, the essential difference between the 3-5-2 and the 3-4-3 is in the 3-4-3, you have an extra body up forward. In the 3-5-2, you take one of them bodies out from the forward line and you actually put it into your midfield. Now, with the 3-4-3, Jack, there are actually some pros to it, in my opinion. We don't really give up too many chances inside our box in that formation in the 3-4-3. We've proven so far this season with the results we've got that we are very, very difficult to beat. And in the majority of the times we've used this formation, maybe hasn't really clicked this season, but we have actually been very, very dangerous on the counter-attack. 2022 up until the summer, we won the highest scoring teams in Europe. So we have been lethal on the counter-attack, but maybe despite being second highest scorers in the Premier League, have not used the ball well enough going forward at times. Now, as well, another pro going into this North London Derby in the 3-4-3, Jack, would be that Arsenal do like to play a back four, and we will play three up front. And in that formation, if you look at it, especially against Leicester, and all the time we've used it, the two wing backs essentially bomb forward and act as wingers. So, and then the likes of Son and Kulu usually kind of come into more central areas. And what happens then is you essentially have five going forward. So with Arsenal's back four, you then start asking questions with all the overlaps we'll be doing. You ask questions of their back four. Do they remain compact and deal with the guys in the central areas and let the boys have the ball out wide? Or do they then start engaging our wing backs, which then leaves more space for Kane and Kulu and Son inside in central areas to be able to play through? So you will ask questions of that back four because the amount of overloads we will have going forward. And it also allows Kane to drop in, pick up the ball, and allow Son and Kulu then to get running in behind, which we've seen against Leicester, especially with Kulu getting just getting straight in behind, and Kane playing them balls in, which then stretches the back line. So for me, I would say they're definitely the pros of that formation. But then there are cons, Jack. In this formation in possession, the wing-backs essentially, like I said, are instructed to get very high and wide and join the attacks. But what that does, Jack, then is because so far this season, like I was explaining, we haven't used the ball too well going forward in forward areas this season. And we're getting the ball turned over, whether it's us giving it away, sloppy touches or passes or whatever. And our wing-backs are exposed very high up the pitch, which we've seen against Leicester up until Conte made some of them changes into the 3-5-2. And what's happening then is teams are actually exploiting us down the sides of us. So whether it's Romero or whether it's Langley, Davies or Sanchez, teams are exploiting getting down the sides of us because our wing-backs have been caught so high up the field. And I would actually say, if you go back and look at some of the games this year, that's probably our second weakest area in this formation, bar the set pieces that we can't defend, is teams getting down either side of us. And they're doing it an awful lot. Even Southampton, their first goal came from getting down the side of us, pulling it back. There's been a few goals like that this season that has happened. And I would say that is probably the real weakness in this formation for us defensively. But then also in midfield, like we're instructed to play out from the back. But because there's only two bodies in midfield, Højbjerg and Bentancur have to play a very disciplined role. And at times when they come up against the tree, they struggle to actually get on the ball because they're being marked, which then kind of affects our play because you're looking for us to hit the wing backs or hit the ball into forward areas a lot of the times. And at times so far this season, that hasn't worked. Teams have kind of, maybe you would say, sussed us out in them sort of areas. Whereas in the 3-5-2, you would actually, because the extra body in midfield with Basuma, you're actually freeing up Højbjerg and Bentancur to drop into pockets of space to pick up that ball. Whereas when we're on the ball, they necessarily might not have been able to do it because if the ball gets turned over, they can't be caught out of that middle.
And can you really sacrifice three? Can you really sacrifice three players to try to man mark Højbjerg, Basuma, and Bentancur? Like that's going to be a lot because you already have a back three then to deal with too. Because then you're just going to give Romero acres of space and time on the ball, which you probably don't want. It's a good point you make there, Dave. When you do add that extra body in midfield, someone in that midfield is likely going to probably have some time to be able to, take the ball and maybe progress the play. And most likely it will be Basuma. But it's a good point you make there, where when you only have two in the midfield, if they want to go for it, they can't overload them. You're right.
Yeah. And as well, like when I was talking about our wing-backs being caught up forward, if you have that extra body in midfield, you then allow Højbjerg and Bentancur to provide protection on either side if them wing-backs are actually caught further forward, which they will be instructed to do as well in the 3-5-2. But Jack, also at the minute, out of possession, it limits how quickly we can actually go after the ball, go after it with a bit of intensity. At times, like when you see us in that 3-4-3, if we can't get the press on in the forward areas, we're very quick to drop back into shape. And we're then often waiting for the opposition to make a mistake in possession, try and force a pass over the top to nobody to try and get the ball back and build our attacks again. So I'd say that's definitely the cons of the 3-4-3 formation. But when I look at the 3-5-2, Jack, I look at the pros going into this. So with Basuma, it helps protect that defense, but also allows us to gain more dominance in the midfield. It benefits Højbjerg and Bentancur so much because they can actually be more proactive about going after the ball so that we can actually get real pressure on the ball higher up the pitch than what we can in the 3-4-3, with Basuma still protecting that middle and still protecting that back line. It also allows Højbjerg and Bentancur to get a lot more involved in the build-up play going forward, which is also a huge plus, which means we can actually get more bodies going through the middle, in and around the edge of the area, maybe making runs in beyond Kane, whereas before in the 3-4-3, we can't do that because one of them almost has to kind of play that more defensive role in the 3-4-3, whereas they'll actually be allowed to get forward and affect the play a lot more going forward. Like I said, it would provide extra cover for the wing-backs as well. But also, and just to kind of back up what I'm saying, go and look at that Leicester game. Look at two of the goals when we changed to the 3-5-2 came from us pressing the ball in the midfield, turning it over and getting it into the forward line. And also, Bentancur came out with a goal. Højbjerg came out with an assist. So, it really does actually help them and their game a lot more. And like I said, in possession, it allows them to drop into pockets to pick it up. So I think there's a lot more pros for our midfield, I would say, in this formation, but also the wing backs. It means they won't be exposed as much going forward because we have extra bodies there to kind of cover for them.
Just a quick question and quick follow-up on all that, Dave. Do you feel like then with that 3-4-3, you said there are a lot of pros, obviously, with the 3-5-2, almost like you even pointed out, almost more comfortable for most of the players in the team anyways, the 3-5-2. Do you feel like the 3-4-3, it can be really effective, and we have seen it be really effective, but maybe a good takeaway from what all you just said is a lot of things maybe have to go right in order for the 3-4-3 really to work. There are a lot of moving parts to it. You have to have a very disciplined midfield. Like you said, the wing backs can't get caught out is one of the points you also brought up as well. Do you feel like the 3-4-3, Dave, just in order for it to be truly effective, maybe for this Spurs team in particular, a lot of things have to go right?
100%. Look, out of possession, every single player has to be willing to suffer. Even Kane, Son, and Kulu, they have to get right back in, drop deep into their own half. So even when we
That
turn the ball
5-4-1.
over,
Yeah,
we have a lot of ground to make up to try and get up the field, which then makes you have to make sure each pass is perfect. Each control that you're doing when you receive the ball is absolutely perfect.
right.
And at times this season, it has not been, which means then we're giving away the ball and actually keeping ourselves under a lot of pressure. Whereas in the 3-5-2, you can actually keep Kane and Son up top, which always gives you an out ball. So in a 3-5-2, it probably allows for more mistakes, but also allows us to be a bit more balanced in terms of defense and attack rather than being so much more defensive like we are in the 3-4-3, Jack. I would say the only downside in the 3-5-2 is you would actually have to play Kulu at right wing back, which is a huge risk in itself. Because we don't really know what Kulu is like defensively. Now, he'll be coming up against Martinelli, or probably most likely Martinelli, but if they decide to switch Saka, it could be Saka. And if he switches off with the way Arsenal like to play and make them runs in behind, we will be punished. So it is a huge risk. But the reason why I say you have to play Kulu there is going forward, because you're taking one of them bodies out of the forward areas, you need your wing backs to be very creative on the ball, very good on the ball, be assured that they're crossing, be assured that they're passing. And Kulu is a lot more reliable in that area than what Emerson is. In the 3-4-3, you get away with Emerson because Kulu can come out and help him. But Emerson wouldn't have that help from Kulu in the 3-5-2. So you do actually have to play Kulu there. But like I said, it is a huge risk because you don't know what he's like defensively. But in the 3-5-2...
How detrimental would it be, sorry to interrupt you
Yeah,
though,
no,
Dave, how detrimental would it be if he did go for Emerson in the 3-5-2? So let's say the standard formation, what we probably would predict, maybe Perisic out wide to fill in sort of that creativity as a wing back. Then he goes for the likes of Bentancur, Basuma, Højbjerg, and then the other wing back being Emerson. I mean, what is it? Could it lose us the game? Could we get kind of stalled or kind of get cagey in certain parts of the game because Emerson? What would go wrong maybe if Emerson was at right wing back? Is what I'm trying to
see. The way I look at it, Jack, I think you have to pick them depending on your opposition. Kulu will win you a game. Emerson will also help you win you a game defensively because he's better than Kulu. So for me, I think you judge it on the opposition on what you need. And if you look at Inter Milan, with that right wing back situation, he actually swapped between two of them depending on what was needed down that right hand side, whether it was more solid defensively, or whether you need someone actually better on the ball going forward in terms of you think you're going to dominate the possession. But also effectively, if you play Emerson in a game where you need that creativity, it could also cost you. But then Kulu could cost you if you play him in a defensive game. So for me, I actually think it has to be picked solely based on the opposition and what your game plan is and how much possession you actually think you're going to have in that formation. But just maybe to cap it off, the reason why I would actually play the 3-5-2 against Arsenal is I think it would actually isolate Jesus with that three in midfield. you only have Jesus up front for Arsenal. So you have that blanket in front of him, but also that defence there as well with three. So it's going to be very hard for them to actually find or get the ball into someone like Gabriel Jesus. It will actually isolate him. Whereas in the 3-4-3, because they have that extra body in midfield to play around us, they will find Jesus a lot of the time. So I think we could isolate Jesus by playing that 3-5-2. But also
Mm,
it means we can also get pressure on their danger man in terms of Odegaard. That guy's pulling the strings this year. They weren't happy with some of his output a lot last year. Maybe towards the end of the campaign he picked up. But this season he's their sort of danger man. He's their one that picks up the ball, plays all these passes he can shoot. So you can also get Basuma onto him while
it's
actually
true.
getting a lot of pressure on Granit Xhaka. Now, he will play, and Jack, we've seen this time and time again with the guy. If he's under constant pressure on the ball and off the ball, he would explode and get a red card. So it would also put a lot of pressure on him and hoping that you can get him either booked nice and early or get him a red card, which means
Mm,
then you reduce Arsenal down to 10 men at home, which then puts you in the ascendancy. So for me, that's why I would play the 3-5-2, because I think against Arsenal, I actually believe we could sacrifice one of them forward area players because we still have enough with Kane and Son to be
I
able
agree.
to rip their defence apart and get in behind. So I would actually, I know it's a long-winded answer and hopefully everyone's enjoyed what I've had to say, but that's why I would go with the 3-5-2 at the Emirates, Jack.
Absolutely love it, Dave. So everybody, there it is. There's Dave had his therapy session with the 3-5-2 versus the 3-4-3. Of course, I had my own with the actual video that went up on the channel. So Dave got to have his say. So if you enjoyed it, everybody, do let me know in those comments below. But for the actual listeners on the podcast, we're going to move on to the next bit of a subject here. Maybe kind of an interesting one that's not as much of a tactical sort of discussion, almost more theoretical, you could say. Why is it so hard to get away or to get a result away from home in the North London Derby? And is it possible this time around? Is the question that I have up on screen. And to be fair, Dave, I don't really know if I have an answer for why it's so hard to get a result away from home, apart from the fact that there seems to be no sort of form or any sort of a kind of a, you could say, yeah, like there's no sort of form or motivation that goes into these games. These seem to all just be one kind of part affairs where usually the home team is kind of having all this pride and all this sort of kind of you could say kind of respect with the fans that's on the line
Mhm.
here, and they seem to always come through even if the team is completely out of form, even if the team is in their worst moments. They will always find it a way, whether it be a 2-1 win, whether it be a
Mhm.
3-1 win that's sort of ugly and lucky. No matter what, it always seems to be the home team will find the result. But can it be different this time around? It's hard to know because I'd like to think that both teams have improved dramatically from last time this fixture occurred. What's really funny, I think, is when you looked at this fixture last year, both teams were kind of going into it in actually poor form. Nuno started off well, but then actually, I believe, was on the back of two defeats from Crystal Palace as well as
Mhm.
Chelsea. And then Arsenal had that really bumpy start to the season to begin with. And so both teams were, in fact, kind of, you could say, in fact, playing like mid-table sort of kind of fodder in the beginning of the season last or under that season of Nuno. But then by the time we reached the following North London derby with Conte's team, you're starting to see that these teams had all of a sudden like transformed into
Mhm.
entirely different clubs, entirely different sort of expectations and whatnot. And it's actually quite remarkable. As much as I'm not at all trying to praise Arsenal, I'm actually more just trying to praise maybe the rivalry kind of itself here. Is that
Mhm.
this time around, what I am wondering is maybe form going to go into it? Is maybe motivation and kind of confidence going to go into it? Because in previous years, no, it really didn't matter. It was always just that one unique fixture that nothing really just goes into it. It's just always
Mhm.
just kind of a battle out there that usually the home team comes through. But this time around, I must say, it's the best Arsenal I've seen in a long time, and it's also the best Spurs team I've seen in a long time, Dave. So that's what I'm actually interested in.
Mhm.
Perhaps this is actually more of I don't want to belittle the fixture, but this is actually more of kind of a quality 11v11 sort of players out there, where in previous years there were actually some dross players, you could say,
Mm,
representing, either side kind of in the 11s. And
mm,
you could say man to man, it's actually pretty good teams coming up against each other. And I actually feel like this is one of probably, if not maybe the best fixture that's yet to happen in the Premier League so far, because these are the two top teams basically in the Premier League right now, bar Man City. So for some reason, Dave, all that kind of that I'm building up for, I should probably get a job with maybe Sky Sports or something with all that build up I gave to the North
mm,
London Derby. But makes me think that it could be different this time. Perhaps Spurs do maybe scrap a result, or just maybe even the game itself could be played differently, because I actually
mm,
think both teams are just so much better. Like, they just have such quality players, such better managers, apart from maybe Lego Man in the past being, a laughing stock, is starting to look a
mm.
lot better in all respect to him. So I don't know, Dave. I think it's just what's nice to see is this rivalry in terms of actual quality on the pitch has certainly improved, if you see what I'm trying to say.
No, 100%. I definitely agree with you there. I think there's a number of factors that go into why is it always the home team that win. Now, first of all, a little stat for you. Since the formation of the Premier League, the away team has only won once in this fixture with 6 draws. So that kind of backs you up with the home team always wins the North London Derby. Um, and what I will say is I think the reason why it's so hard to get a result, Jack, is we're both rivals, and you dare not lose at home.
Yeah.
You dare not lose at home in front of your fans. But there's a lot to be said for the atmospheres that can be created. You look at the one we created last season when we absolutely slapped them at home. They were intimidated driving up to the stadium. They were intimidated having to walk through the stadium. And they were also intimidated as soon as they walked out with the hatred and the noise and the passion behind the Tottenham team, but the hatred for the Arsenal, which was absolutely great to see. And I think with Arsenal, Mikel Arteta, young guy, coach, I think he was caught off guard, and Conte showed his naiveness. He bet him in the press before the game, by the way, and absolutely
Yeah,
ridiculed
that's
him in
right.
the press after. So Conte's experience showed. Our experience on the pitch also showed against Arsenal. But even when we go to the Emirates, we're met with the same hate. It turns from a library into all of a sudden having flags everywhere, everyone chanting and everything else. So there's a lot to be said for the intimidating atmosphere, and it takes a special type of character and a special type of team to be able to turn up at your
Mm,
stadium and get the result. Now, look, when I was growing up, Arsenal sort of had the lion's share of the North London derbies because they just had a much better team than what we
I
did
agree.
at the time. But there are times where we have put up some great contests, but they always had that know-how or that experience to see out them tight games, whereas maybe we didn't. But over the last few years, the North London Derby is played on more of an even keel, I would say. I
I
think
agree with that.
and I think that alludes to maybe the quality as well of where Tottenham have got. Now, the biggest question is, has Arsenal regressed or has Tottenham progressed? Now, we will be discussing that when we have the Arsenal fans on with us tomorrow, Wednesday night. That is one question I have in there because I think it'd be very interesting to find out the answer to that. But do you know what, Jack? It's just one of them games. You just cannot lose at home. It's all
Yep.
about the bragging rights. You can't let your fans down. The guys that follow you through thick and thin that, give up so much of their time just to watch you all the time. So for me, it's kind of giving back to the fans. And I think that's why you find it very, very hard to go and win away. But this time, Jack, I think it will be different. I think even if you go back to the North London Derby where we brutalised them at home, they had Nketiah up front. They now got Gabriel Jesus, so they've improved their midfield. I don't think they've improved on whatsoever. I actually think that's their biggest weakest point. If you could get another body in there and match them up for mid, player for player in there, I think you'd actually dominate them. Their back line, you would say their centre backs have probably improved a little as well. Still don't think they've improved as much out the wing backs, but you would say their centre backs have improved. But then you look at Tottenham. Last season, we had the bare 11. This year, I think we've improved even better, even more defensively. I think we've improved. I think our midfielders probably improved a little bit more as well. I would say in terms of the impact that Højbjerg has had, Bentancur coming to the fore. But our front line is maybe off it. But against Leicester, they were all on it. So hopefully going into this North London derby, everybody will be at it. And I do think going to the Emirates this time compared to under Nuno, I think they're in for a much different game. I'll be honest. You look at it, 3-0 down at halftime. I would say some of them players wanted Nuno sacked. And I've
Yeah,
said this before. I think they used that game to try and get him sacked, in my opinion. Because we questioned, how can you look so much better in the second half? So I do think some of them players, they weren't having Nuno. We know Kane wasn't having Nuno. And I think they used that game to try and put pressure on him, or maybe for him to lose
perhaps.
his
Yeah,
job, because it wasn't too long after that he ended up losing it.
you're right.
But this time with Conte going in, I think we're going in there with a different mentality altogether. In terms of, we're turning up there with more of a desire. We're not afraid to turn up there, make the game ugly, grind out them hard moments, but also take our moments. I also think the mentality of the players are different. I think Conte's tactics, I think, will outsmart Arteta. I think he will have a plan for him, to be honest with you. And look, it's going to be hard to get a result at the toilet bowl, but I don't see why we can't make this one 2-1, Jacko.
Yeah,
I really do
yeah,
believe we can. I think
yeah.
our midfield would absolutely dominate theirs. I really still think that.
I really good answer there, Dave. Kind of what I was sort of alluding to as well, and maybe what I might add, and then we'll move on to the next one, is just that I just feel like this sort of occasion now, you've seen that while Arsenal maybe have improved, which I gave them credit for, I think Spurs have just gone from an entirely different level from the years that I have seen them
Mm,
go to the Emirates before, even under the Pochettino days, Dave. I know that we were an exceptional team to watch, but there were still sort of question marks, I think, with maybe how even I guess we were kind of like that Arsenal team, maybe a bit naive in the way that
yeah.
sometimes we approach games. Didn't maybe consider the opposition, or didn't consider the kind of the fixture itself and kind of what it meant
Mm,
and things like that. We sometimes overlook things like that because we were a young team and we were maybe a naive team. Whereas this time around, I feel like the quality is there. That perhaps maybe Poch didn't have in previous
mm,
seasons. The quality is there with this team. And then as well, we actually have a manager that I think wouldn't allow that sort of thing to happen
mm.
that Nuno suffered last season. It's just not something that I think really happens to Antonio Conte in games like this.
You
He will find a way, I think. And in fact, if
can,
I'm not surprised, no matter what formation he even picks, I don't want to go back into that conversation, but no matter what formation he picks, I imagine a huge game plan of his is to go into halftime to not concede, like not concede
100%.
before we go into halftime. And if anybody's going to achieve that, it's not like he's one of the best managers in the world to try not
Mm,
to, to achieve that goal, to not concede before halftime. And I feel like that's going to be a huge plus for Spurs, because I don't know, that could be the huge secret to winning a North London derby away from home, is going to halftime, having not conceded, make the away team rattled, even if they've dominated you all game,
yeah.
even if they've been all over you, as long as you haven't conceded. If it's 0-0, maybe 1-0, that would be glorious. But you go into that halftime having them a bit rattled, and then it's kind of anyone's game actually in that,
Mm,
because even the fans go into kind of the second half being a bit rattled, even a bit kind of disturbed. I
mm,
think that's even what made sort of kind of the game against West Ham. And I don't want to connect this and kind of in a broad way. What I mean to say is, like, that West Ham game also being a London derby, like they went into that kind of a bit rattled with how Spurs, I think, sort of handled
mm,
that first half. And if we had completed that performance, I think that would have shown the real professionalism that I know is
mm,
in this sort of team. And I have a feeling that maybe these players learned from how they sort of messed up in that game against West Ham, because I do feel like they had it actually in their grasp to silence the crowd, to get the crowd to almost turn against their own
yeah.
players in a way. And I feel like you could do that against Arsenal in a way. If you get to halftime 0-0 or whatever result it may be, as long as you don't
Mm,
concede by halftime, you can maybe get into the fans' heads. You can get into those players' heads, get into the Lego man's head, and then it's kind of anybody's game after that. So if anybody's going to do it, Dave, I feel like it's probably Antonio Conte, and it's probably this set of players who are a bit more
mm.
experienced than maybe the players that we've had before under the Pochettino days and whatnot.
I agree. I agree. Just a couple of things there. You alluded to Poch and Conte, and I just kind of thought came to mind. I'd love to know what you and the people out there think. Under Pochettino, because the atmosphere was, and we all know this, he was like best friends with the player, was very
Right.
friendly. Was there any sort of punishment after a North London derby loss away at the Emirates? I
Maybe
wouldn't
no
say so.
golfing.
I say it was
No
dust
golfing
yourself
with
down,
Poch.
pick yourself up again. Look, guys, forget about that. You're still great. This, that, and the other. Under Jose Mourinho, there wasn't any punishment because he made them, it was up to them to do their own gym work and stuff like that. It actually wasn't a part of their training plans. It was up to them to take care of themselves. So I wouldn't say there was any punishments. Under Nuno, there was definitely none. That's why they turned in the performance they did. But under Conte, you best believe if they don't execute what he wants them to execute in this North London derby, they will be punished the following week. Regardless of the games coming up, they will be punished like they were against Sporting. They were brought into training a lot earlier. They were made do a lot more running. They were made do a lot more tactical stuff, and it's going to happen again under North London derby. And the biggest difference is Pochettino, they're respecting him. Conte, they fear him. And that's the biggest difference. They also respect him, but they also fear him. And I think you're going to see a much more improved and a better Tottenham turn up in this North London derby, more focused. I also think we can actually impact it more from the bench than what they can. I think we've better options coming off the bench than what they do. So I think that's another way we can actually also impact this game. Like you said, if we can hold in there till the second half, get boys off the bench, you can maybe change formation, change one or two areas of the pitch and go and nick that winner. But also, what was my last point?
Someone like Richie, just like maybe while you find your point, someone like Richie, while you find your point, Richie would be an absolute. I mean, if you get into halftime 0-0, Dave, and you bring on Richie maybe 50th minute, 60th minute in the second half, and like a caged animal, almost like bringing him on onto the pitch, he would just cause absolute havoc, I would imagine, in that sort of game. So if anything would be my sort of goal for this sort of game, I would be very proud of the team, and I would be very proud of Conte as well as just the tactics. If as long as we get into halftime with sort of a 0-0 kind of result, and they're a bit rattled after it, and even like I said, even if we get dominated in certain periods of the game, it doesn't really matter to me. I expect that this is a really tough fixture to get a result in. As long as we don't concede in that first half, I feel like we'll be in a good place because I think then Arsenal will get frustrated. Arsenal might actually probably open themselves up a bit more. They might go for a poor substitution like we've seen Arteta do in the past. Feel like then it starts to become anyone's game. I don't think it's anyone's game in the first half. I do think it's Arsenal's game in the first half. They'll have all that momentum of the crowd. They'll have all the momentum of how well they've also played so far this season as well. It just feels like if you get into that second half with it being a good score line for maybe Spurs, that's when it starts to become anyone's game in my eyes.
Good point. 100%. I couldn't agree with you. I think my final point is it kind of touches on a couple of things you alluded to. The blueprint is there for Man United. Sat back, soaked up the pressure, played them on the counter, kept three bodies forward and absolutely obliterated them with that space in behind. Right. So that maybe is another reason if we do go 3-4-3, don't be disappointed because you can see what Conte is trying to do. Soak up the pressure, keep the three boys up front and get ball up to them and let them run that back line ragged. But also, you alluded to Arteta making substitutions. Some of the substitutions he made, even Arsenal fans talk about it, they were mind-boggling. He kind of went for the game when the game was still in the balance and it ended up actually costing them the game. And we've spoke about this in big moments. Arteta tries to make big decisions like Pep Guardiola does, like Guardiola done in the Champions League, taking out Fernandinho and opting not to play with that CDM. And he's from Guardiola's school, so he will also try and be Guardiola. So hopefully he tries to make that big brain dead decision and it comes back against him because we've seen it happen to him time and time again. So I think that actually wraps up our thoughts on the North London derby.
Certainly when it comes to that, why it's so hard to win away from home. The other thing, and maybe you probably brought this up, Dave, we've been bringing up a lot of Spurs strengths and weaknesses, and I think we've been bringing up a lot of Arsenal strengths and weaknesses. I don't want to go with Arsenal first, but just quickly on that kind of Lego man comment that you sort of said there. I feel like, if anything, from what I've noticed with Arsenal, they start off first halves really strong, really fast, really well, sort of like they're following his tactics to the book. Kind of like a Guardiola team, like you said. That's kind of almost very Guardiola-esque as well. Starting off very strong, starting off very well and organized and proper and dominating the game. It just feels like if you survive that little spell of when they do that, they can start to become a bit unraveled is what I would argue. But let's go into maybe Spurs' strengths and weaknesses and kind of talk about what maybe makes Spurs so good this season, kind of going into this one, and maybe what we can rely on sort of win this game. I'll start first. I think obviously, no matter how well pundits like to talk about how well Arsenal is playing, Spurs still basically boast probably the best forward line of the Premier League, at least in my eyes, when they do have the options of
Mm,
playing Kulusevski, Kane, Son, as well
yeah.
as Richarlison. I mean, it is a brilliant set of players to be able to pick from, so many different combinations to go for. And it's also, I think, kind of backed up by the fact that Spurs, while they may not really have a true creative midfielder, they do
Mm,
actually have a huge strength and probably having one of, you could say, the strongest midfields. And I do mean in kind of the physical sense, one of the kind of steel kind
mm,
of midfields, the steeliest maybe midfield, if that is a word. Because with the likes of Højbjerg, Basuma, Bentancur, Skip, these are all guys that would absolutely just run through a player in order to win the ball. I mean, all they do is just get stuck in and just play the ball into the forwards. They're happy to do the dirty work. They're happy to do kind of the type of work that most midfielders these days are pretty reluctant to do. And it's pretty nice that Spurs kind of in a way have those in abundance. And when you even look quickly at Arsenal, like they really only have one or two mid players that really would like to do that sort of dirty work in the team, where Spurs kind of boast four, if
sure.
not five players in the midfield that are happy to do that sort of thing.
I would even
Uh,
say all 11, Jack. I'd say everyone's willing to suffer.
right.
Everyone.
Exactly. And I think then that is another strength. Maybe that's a third strength of Spurs is it's just like you said, the fact that they fear Antonio Conte and the fact that they respect Antonio Conte so much and they know how he likes to play, which is at all 11 kind of inclusive sort of suffering, like you said, Dave. I think that's also a strength is that there is sort of a unity in this squad that when times are looking tough, maybe in the games, when maybe Spurs are under a bit of pressure, under maybe kind of maybe not the best sort of spells when the team is trying to dominate us. They seem to
Mm,
somehow come out of it. They seem to be able to stick together and sort of kind of rise out of that sort of pressure and be able to win games and be able to get results. And that is also a strength of ours. Whereas maybe people have been praising Arsenal for, you could say, starting off first half strongs and getting good results right away. Spurs, maybe what you have to admit, their big strength is staying in games and being able
yeah.
to kind of be really hard to defeat, really hard to knock out, almost kind of like Mayweather-ish, you could say, Dave, with how
Mm,
Spurs kind of play. They really almost play the long game where they're basically just dodging every punch that you're trying to throw at them, and
mm,
eventually they're able to just sort of grind out a result and grind out a win. So it's almost again like maybe a fourth strength that I guess we've added to the team. Another thing I may add is probably just manager wise. If you look at the two managers, one is more experienced than the other. And I think that's also a huge strength of ours is having someone like Antonio Conte, who is probably more likely, I would say, to get a result away from home in this North London derby than Arteta. I think when we go into our home fixture, I would not be really as worried about Arteta getting a result
mm,
away from home. Whereas I feel like it's more warranted to feel like Conte could get a decent result, maybe away from home in a North London derby. I think that's a huge strength of ours. And then maybe, like you mentioned before, Dave, perhaps the strength from the bench. But anything maybe you want to add that I've missed there, Dave, or
mm.
should we maybe move on into weaknesses and whatnot? Anything that you want to talk about?
Just quickly, I actually think I have one that can transition from the strength to the weaknesses, Jack, is set pieces. Set pieces attacking,
Right, this
we're
season.
an absolute strength. Gianni Vio, absolute god at set pieces. And as you can see, it's reflected with the amount of set piece goals we've already got this season. But it's also an Achilles heel defensively. We struggle to defend them, whether it's been, we've tried zona, we've also tried man marking. Sorry, flip that around. We've tried man marking, then now we're trying zona, and it's
Mm,
just not working whatsoever. We do not have players that have that inner desire to want to be the first one to meet that ball, who doesn't mind taking it out, bang to the head to go and win that ball. So I think that's a real strength in terms of attacking, but also a real weakness in terms of defensive,
that's a really
Jack.
good point. Yeah. And then maybe weaknesses, I would say, let's just go into it. I might cover these as well. Ball playing center backs, we only really have two and a half of them. I would say Eric Dyer is occasionally a great ball playing center back, also can be a poor one at times. Romero, maybe our best one, likes to take risks. We all know, but that's sort of what makes him brilliant and
Mm.
even could help us out, especially if we're playing that 3-5-2. The likes of Longley, I think, is shown that he can be excellent on the ball.
Yeah.
The question is, though, this is a huge game for him to come into, and will he be ready? I think he'll have to be because I've heard some news that Ben Davies is not going to be available. People that are listening, so Longley could be expected to be playing this one, and I think it is actually a secret benefit to Spurs because he is a better ball playing center back than the likes of Ben Davies. Perhaps a weakness for Spurs is maybe that creativity in midfield. As much as we praise the steel of the midfield, we do probably lack a James Madison like player to really just come into the ball and kind of just be able to just change the game with one pass or just be able to break the lines just
Let me ask you
easily.
on that.
Yeah,
Do
yeah.
you think that would change if we went to the 3-5-2 and played like a Basuma in there and allowed Højbjerg and Bentancur? Because in the 3-4-3, like I said earlier on, they more or less play defensive midfield roles. But in a 3-5-2, when we've seen against Leicester, they can actually get forward and affect the play. Bentancur came out with a goal. Højbjerg came out with an assist. Do you
Hmm.
think that'll actually change if we switch to a 3-5-2 and you would actually see more from them guys more in terms of affecting the game going forward?
I think we would still need to go after a creative midfielder in the transfer market. Don't get me wrong, but you actually could probably get away with it in the case of Højbjerg and Bentancur, especially I think in Højbjerg's case, because Højbjerg, even in the 3-4-3, has made more of those runs forward than Bentancur has. Despite Bentancur, like you said, being able to pick up the ball, turn on the ball, and find players, whereas
Mm,
Højbjerg likes to sit a bit deeper. Most times then still in the 3-4-3 you see Højbjerg making those Viking runs often when he sees the opportunity to try to get forward, and I think
mm,
that's probably a benefit. Maybe if Basuma is
yeah,
just sitting in the middle, you give maybe Højbjerg the license to be a kind of a interesting sort of creative
yeah,
midfielder, and we have seen him do that for Denmark in the past where he sort of made those runs forward where Thomas Delaney would actually sit back. And then also what kind of benefited from that is Højbjerg can win the ball then high up the pitch if he
mm,
is given that license. And he is a scary guy to try to take it past because he usually
mm,
just shows you the weight room or he usually reads you like a book in most cases as well and is able to kind of take it off you. So it could be an interesting kind of tactic. And I don't know, perhaps we could get away with not having a true creative midfielder
mm,
till January, Dave, with the likes of Højbjerg and Bentancur if they continue to play well, if they actually
mm,
tap into a part of their game that they haven't really been able to in the 3-4-3, if they're able to tap into that using
mm.
kind of more of a license to go forward, be
Yeah,
interesting. It asks more of them though. It's asking like a different sort of role from them because like you brought
yeah,
up before, the 3-4-3 much more disciplined,
yeah,
and they're much more focused on kind of what Conte is asking of them. Whereas maybe
yeah,
in that 3-5-2, they have to be a bit more expressive.
yeah,
And are they capable of that? I think Højbjerg is because I am a Højbjerg stan. I am a Højbjerg lover, but um, I don't know. It's an interesting question. I think we could
mm,
get away with it though.
yeah. Yeah, no, I think we will. I think we will. I think we're a bit harsh on the creativity coming from midfield, though, because Højbjerg's already got a couple of goals and a couple of
It's
assists.
true.
So,
I don't even know. Maybe I'm just kind of using the
no,
public
I
sort
do, I
of
do get what you're
speaking
saying.
points. Yeah, yeah.
I
Maybe
do get what
to
you're saying.
spark some
Maybe
good
there are games
discussion.
where you are looking for that player to maybe have that killer ball over the top. Have that maybe bit of vision that maybe someone like a Højbjerg or Bentancur do not have because they're used to playing deep roles. I do get what you're saying. But I do think it can be solved by putting Basuma in there
I
now.
think I agree with
Having
you.
Højbjerg and Bentancur
I
have
think I
free
agree with
roles.
you. I think it's more to I think I more set it out of to spark some discussion as well as settle the frustrations maybe with the fans because
Mm,
it seems like what people just don't want to see Højbjerg's passing and they don't want to see
mm,
Højbjerg's distribution and his tempo setting. So it seems like in order to settle all parties, Dave, no matter how brilliantly you put that, looks like Spurs are just going to have to sign a guy with a pretty haircut for the 3-5-2 in order to really settle people. I think we just need a
yeah,
pretty haircut. We should have gotten Lucas Paqueta. He has some nice hair. Apparently, he could probably do it as well. So, big shame because
mm,
his hair is just not good enough. I would say to satisfy people in the midfield. But Arsenal's maybe weaknesses. We could touch on kind of
fullbacks,
quickly.
midfield,
Fullbacks in the
fullbacks,
midfield.
midfield.
I
It's
feel
their
like it's
biggest
just Dave.
weaknesses.
I just Thomas Partey. If they don't have him, they seem to come undone. The moment Thomas Partey is not in that team, they come undone, and it's probably because he's the only guy that they can truly rely on to do that steel work, like we were
Yeah.
talking about earlier in the midfield. They would kill to have a Skip. They would kill to have Højbjerg in that team because that means when Thomas Partey isn't available, they can have someone to rely on to do that sort of work that he does.
Well, they say they can rely on him, Jack, but remember he got injured and ended up hobbling off. Why I think it was Harry Kane went on to score in the North London Derby
And
under
he's very injury prone. He's injury prone going into this game. I think he's actually a
yeah,
bit of a doubt
I think
going
he's
into
out.
this game.
I think he's actually out for this game. But look, you've got Granit Xhaka in there. just unreliable. Talksport done a big thing on it there the other day where they were maybe arguing that Xhaka was better than Højbjerg, more influential. But then O'Hara stuck up for Højbjerg brilliantly and said, look, Xhaka's, you just don't know whether he's going to get sent off or not. You can't rely on him, whereas you can rely on Højbjerg. And I've also looked into the stats. Højbjerg's been at Tottenham 3 years, has 11 goals and 10 assists in the Premier League. Or across all competitions, and Xhaka only has like 20 goals and like 14 assists or something like that. So, and he's been at Arsenal nearly 5-6 years now, I think. So Højbjerg is well on course to be a lot more influential in the team than what Granit Xhaka is. And then he's not good enough. This is a guy that was practically out the door for a long time. All of a sudden, they give him a new contract. He's still around. Ødegaard, good going forward defensively. I think there's question marks. And I just think the centre midfield is probably an area where Arsenal need to do more work in the window, and they didn't. They brought in Patrick Vieira's long-lost cousin, Vieira 0.20. It's absolutely ridiculous. I don't think they have enough steel or enough about them in that midfield. And
they can get bullied. As much as they're pretty at keeping the ball, Dave, they're a very pretty team at keeping the ball. They can get bullied by the likes of Spurs as midfielders, especially, again, if, like we said, if we go with 3 in the midfield there, you think Fabio Vieira, Ødegaard, and especially if Thomas Partey isn't there for them, it could be a problem, because even to your point as well, Granit Xhaka, they can't rely on him to be a deep lying sort of ball winning midfielder for them anymore. They tried to, but they can't, because like you said, gets too rattled, probably gets a red card, maybe gives the ball away a bit too much. He actually has been playing his best sort of kind of football, playing actually the role that we are kind of maybe asking of Højbjerg to play, to actually go a bit further forward, sort of be a bit more expressive going forward. They're actually asking Xhaka, by the looks of things, to maybe come back and win the ball from time to time, but they're actually asking him to help win the ball high up the pitch from what I've seen. And they're kind of getting him away from that back line, almost so that he doesn't commit a red card, because he's less likely to commit a red card in the opposition half than he is in his own half, you would say. So it's something interesting. But if Thomas Partey isn't available, that's a huge weakness for them, Dave. Huge weakness. It could be a huge drop. And that means they're going to have to go with Lakanga, who is basically, I don't know, it's like, I feel like it'd be interesting to look into his record with Arsenal. Whenever he plays, they seem to lose, or whenever he plays, it seems to not be the best of performances. So I don't know, Dave, is that the huge weakness that we point out? Maybe, like you said, the fullbacks and maybe that high line, but really it's that midfield and the lack of a ball winning midfielder, especially if Thomas Partey isn't healthy and isn't like fully fit.
No, 100%. I think the centre midfield is their biggest weakness. I think the centre backs, they've improved, as much as it kills me to say it. And I think the goalkeeper, I think they've got a goalkeeper on the rise. What I will say is the guy does take risks with his feet, so I would be instructing a Spurs.
He's gotten away with a lot. I think what's funny about you're right, Dave. I think Ramsdale, you have to praise the fact that he is more that modern goalkeeper, which we are probably looking for at Spurs soon. And I will say I'm a bit jealous of Saliba, because we do want more ball playing center backs, but at the same time, I would say Ramsdale, I am that guy's riding on luck in certain games, because he's had so many moments where he's gotten away with like just incredible howlers, like where it's just been a poor finish, perhaps just a poor first touch from a player or whatever it was, but he's given the ball away in some bad moments I've seen. And also just as well, like even just made it completely sketchy for no reason at all. So I would say a North London derby, do I expect him to do it? Probably not. But you would expect him to do it in North London.
I would. I think someone like him has an ego, and I think he'll want to do it on the biggest stage possible. And that's why I say anytime the ball's heading back for him, press. Get a bit of a coordinated press going on if you can. Push up, take away his passing opportunities, make him go long to Jesus. Dario Romero or Langley will win that all day long. We recycle the ball. But if he doesn't do that and he tries to play out, we pick their pockets. But also, if he tries to skim one of our players and be clever like he tries, they're just going to take him off and put it in the back of the net. So for me, I think, yes, it's a huge plus for Arsenal that he can pick out some of them long-range passes. I think he's got some of the best distribution in the Premier League from a goalkeeper, but he does take a lot of risks. So for me, I would actually look to use that as a trigger. The moment they go back to him, full press. But their wing-backs is also a weakness for me, Jack. Kieran Tierney Doherty done an excellent job on him the other day for Ireland against Scotland. Gave him a nice elbow into the jaw and rattled him a couple of times. He ended up having to come off injured. Shinchenko, yeah, he's picked it up going forward. He had something going forward defensively. I still don't think he's there yet. And over the other side, tiramisu, Jack, get the spoons out because I'm hungry.
Absolutely love it. Absolutely love it. There's our thoughts on kind of the strengths and weaknesses. Last little thing to touch on here, and then we'll wrap it up here, everybody. But Arsenal, in my eyes, Dave, are often kind of portrayed as very likable, or they seem to
Oh,
be kind of everybody's, how would you say it, like second team? What would you say last season? They weren't everybody's second team last season. I think oftentimes Brighton is a team that everybody really liked, kind of secretly. Crystal Palace sometimes is a team people like, especially now under Vieira. It's hard to remember which team everybody kind of sort of had a secret love for. I'm trying to remember. Maybe it was Brentford at maybe some stages because of them coming back into the Premier League. But I think you know what I'm trying to say.
mm,
Feels like it's Arsenal this season. Like it feels like they're all rooting for them because of the beautiful football that they play, the likes that of the
youngsters.
documentary. They've seen the human side of the Lego Man. They see that he's kind of an up and coming manager. They like how progressive he is. Maybe it's all the young players in the team
Yeah,
and
that's what it is.
whatnot. Yeah, I don't know, Dave, but I think you're trying to get. I think you know what I'm trying to say here. Do you feel
Yeah.
like you agree with me? Like a lot of people that aren't even fans of Arsenal at all, like they're fans of other clubs, other teams, whatever it may be, seem to sort of have this fondness for Arsenal this season.
Yeah, it winds me up. Look, likable should be I think that was a typo, Jack. It should be punchable. Um, Yeah, look, the reason why it is you got Ramsdale. He goes on all these podcasts. He's England's goalkeeper. He plays. He's called up in England the whole time. You got Saka, Smith Rowe. So you've got kind of a good core of English players there. So and they would like to see their players do well. So I mean, I can understand it from that point of view. Then you've got the fan club that followed Odegaard from Norway to Real Madrid. It's and you've got the Gabriel Jesus fan club as well, Zinchenko. And yeah, I think the all or nothing probably done a bit for them to bridge it. I think people felt sorry for them, after collapsing against the top four. And they're like, oh, yeah, I feel bad for them, but they're likable guys. And yeah, it just winds me up, Jack. Plus, they're top of the league, and the media, they hate Tottenham, and it's even better for them when Arsenal's top of the league because it
I
means
agree.
they can just rub their bias in a bit more. But look, that's going to change this weekend. I fully think we're going to beat them. We're going to keep our unbeaten record, and it should be us sitting top of the league as well. So then it'd be great watching the media have to do a complete U-turn. But yeah, I agree with you. People are starting to like them, and I think it's because of the young players. It was like Tottenham when we had that young squad under Poch. Everyone really liked what we were trying to do, liked our squad. We were probably everyone's favourite second team to watch. Arsenal are becoming into that, and it really kills me and winds me up. But look, it is what it is. We'll deal with it on the weekend, Jack.
Yeah, certainly will, and hopefully show them their place. What I may add to that is maybe it's just the fact that they also not only the young players that you touched on, and also the fact that they slipped up in such a fantastic and glorious way. People probably now feel bad for them. I think as well, it actually has to do with stylistic choices of football. I think
Yeah.
people want to watch Arsenal because they play right, similar to maybe a Guardiola team. They have plenty of the ball. They like to make kind of intricate, sort of kind of passing patterns and whatnot. But people like to ignore that they're still fully capable of getting exposed. There are
Mhm.
plenty of games when they come up against teams that they should be probably playing better against that they do get kind of outplayed by, maybe Fulham being a good example. Um, I don't know. I think this Arsenal team certainly have just maybe been portrayed as the good guys this season because even after the Man United defeat, it sort of felt like there wasn't really that many people coming out really, I don't know, criticizing them. They sort of
Mm.
have still kind of kept saying that they're one of the best teams in the league, et cetera, et cetera. I expect them to keep pace with Man City. People have gone that far to say that. I don't know. It just seems like people are secretly rooting for them, is what I might say. And
Yeah, I
part of
agree.
it has to do with the young players, like Dave said. Part of it has to do with the documentary as well. But I think another huge part of it just has to do with people like to watch those sort of progressive, kind of easy on the eye is probably the right phrase. Kind of teams, and I think Arsenal happen to be one of them. Where Spurs are grindstone, kind of make the game almost unwatchable in certain cases, kind of team that get results. And I think that's why Spurs are seen as so unlikable. And also Conte has never really been the most likable kind of player or manager. I think people really respect Conte, and they in fact fear Conte, like maybe you touched on, but they don't really love Conte, opposition fans or teams. I think they just respect him. Whereas I think people love the Lego Man. People that aren't fans of the Lego Man seem to enjoy him.
Do you know what it is, Jack? Everyone loves an underdog story as well. And when you look at the night, like you would say, the manager relatively inexperienced, the squad, of course, they showed their inexperience at the end of last season. And I think everyone also likes to see things come together, a group of young people, and
Yeah,
watch
that
how
makes sense.
they develop and grow together. And that goes back to all the reality series, like, for instance, Geordie Shore and all this thing where people then follow these people's career and they love to watch them sort of grow up in the spotlight. And I think that's why what makes this Arsenal team, in everyone
Yeah.
else's opinion, likable, bar mine. I actually hate it, and I think it's more punchable. I would even go back as saying maybe borderline as punchable as the Invincibles. But yeah, look, it is what it is. I think it's just at this day and age, people love watching people grow up in the spotlight,
Yeah.
and I think that has a part to do with it. But
Great point.
yeah, like I said, this weekend we're going to put it right at the toilet bowl.
Great, Dave. Well, score predictions then, and then we'll sort of wrap it up here.
Yeah, I'm going to
Maybe
go.
I kind of
Go
I'll
on,
take
you
a
go.
draw. Like I want a draw, and I
Yeah.
could see a draw. If Spurs were to get a result here, I could actually see a draw being very possible. It's something I actually envision. I think a win, we would be over the moon. Perhaps need a week off in celebration. Um, I'm gonna go 1-1. I think it could actually end up being not actually a high scoring game. In fact, I'd like to see a 1-1. I'd
Interesting.
be proud of the team with a 1-1 too, because if anything, it sort of meant that we didn't concede too many and we didn't have to rely on the forward line too much either.
Mm.
So I don't know, which is something we've been asking for. So 1-1 is what I'm gonna go for.
I would actually snap your hand off for a draw. I think a draw would be an excellent result. It would be 3 away games that we didn't get results in last season: the Emirates, West Ham, and Stamford Bridge. Plus, it means we remain unbeaten. I would snap your hand off for a draw. But Jack, I think we could win this one. I have a sneaky little feeling we
I
can
love
win it
it.
late in the second half, and I'm going to go 2-1 Tottenham. I
2-1
think
also is on my mind. Yeah.
I think with Fraser Forrester, looks like he will be stepping in for Hugo Lloris. I think we'll be caging for maybe the first 15, 20, 25 minutes. And I think we might actually end up conceding. But I do think we have enough about us, enough grit, desire, and determination, plus the fear factor of Conte to completely change that around
I
the
agree.
second half. And I think we'll score one in the second half in around maybe 65, 70 minutes. And I think then the next one will come maybe in the between 80 and 90 minutes. I think the winner will come. I think we'll go on to win it 2-1. If that prediction comes true, I want people to call me Jesus.
That'd be absolutely glorious, Dave. Well, everybody, thank you so much for listening to this edition of the Tottenham Weekly, the North London kind of special edition, you could say, the Irish Hotspurs Tottenham Weekly podcast. Thank you so much for listening, everybody. Do leave your comments if you are watching this on YouTube, but as well, do check it out on Spotify as well as Amazon if you do get your podcast there, because it's also a great way for you to listen on the go, perhaps wherever you're going, maybe in the car, whatever you may be doing. Great platform to listen to it there. But we'll wrap it up here, everybody. Come on, you Spurs. In Conte, we trust. David and I, we will be seeing you.
See you, everybody. Come on, you Spurs.